Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Rohit Bhatia, Director Beyond Imagination. Beyond Imagination is an organization which is helping you, the society, and other organizations by helping them become digitally enabled. From the entire Beyond Imagination team, to wish you on this special day of International Yoga Day. Also, a very happy International Yoga Day from our eminent speaker, Dr. Elia. So moving forward, welcome Beyond Imagination's global webinar on how to turn around a crisis with happiness. I'm glad to have Dr. Elia on board with us as a speaker who will be talking about this subject in detail during this webinar. Now, as I can see that we have somewhere around 19 to 20,000 viewers right now actually watching us on this live webinar. We have people from US, we have people from UK, we have people from Australia, as I can see, we have people from Bhutan, we have also people from Uzbekistan. Wow, that's so great, that's so cool. I can see, people from Uzbekistan coming and watching our webinar on happiness. That's great. And I can also see people from Denmark, and of course we have so many loving audience from India. Thank you so much for your unconditional love for Beyond Imagination. Now moving forward to the webinar, before we start having a discussion with Dr. Elia, I have some questions for everyone who's joined us today, and these are some questions that I'm very much sure that you all can very well relate to. So, have you ever thought of or really asked yourself that how I want to be happy? Now, happiness has multiple definitions around it, as we are in this world today, and we keep asking ourselves that are we happy? Am I happy with this particular situation? Am I happy with this particular materialistic thing? Or am I happy with this particular emotion? Right? So similarly, for example, I give you that we keep asking ourselves, will I be happy if I get married? Will I be happy if I get a promotion? Or let's go to the precursor. Will I be happy if I get a particular job? Will I be happy if I get the particular degree that I'm looking forward to? So these are multiple questions that we keep asking ourselves, and we keep thinking about that these things are going to be making us happy. I remember a song from one of the movies of Akshay Kumar, which very well had the lyrics which said, "जब नौकरी मिलेगी तो क्या होगा?" Right? बदन पे सूट होगा, पाँव में बूट होगा, etc. etc. So we are making our happiness relate to particular situations also, right? So from that, now let's move to the flip side, move to the other side of the coin, which we very well say that what are the struggles that we think of, what are the blockages that we think of, which are not making us happy. So certain examples that I give you, one of them is some people have diabetes, some people have asthmas, or some people are struggling to clear their exams. Some people are even struggling to get that first or second rank in the entrance exams. So these are the other sides of the coin which make people not happy or which make people unhappy. You think happiness is related to transitional problems, transitional life problems? Well, don't get uneasy. At Beyond Imagination, we are here for you. We are here today for this global webinar where Dr. Elia is with us, and he will be talking about the subject. Dr. Elia, so let me just give some introduction about Dr. Elia. Dr. Elia is a PhD scholar in psychology. He is an author of 2 books, and he is known as the Happiness Doctor. 2 books, I would like to explain further about the 2 books that Dr. Elia has written. So the first book I would like to talk about is 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. And the second book is 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. Now, I've spoken to you about Dr. Elia's books. Now it's time for me to introduce Dr. Elia before everyone on this global webinar. Dr. Elia, wishing you a very good afternoon from India. I know it's good morning out there and you must have been woken up by now for this global webinar. Welcome from entire team and the entire viewers who are watching you live out here on this global webinar by Beyond Imagination. On to you, sir. Now it's for you to start the conversation with everyone.
Good morning, Rohit. It's great to be here with you in the great organization you're with, Beyond Imagination. Today I'm going to be talking about how to navigate a crisis successfully. And as you know, the world is facing a multitude of crises right now, and people are struggling all over. But I also wanted to say, happy International Yoga Day today to all of India and to the rest of the world. So, namaste.
Namaste, Dr. Elia. So nice to have you here. Now, tell us something about your background. As a psychologist, as an executive coach, author, international keynote speaker, and a leadership person.
So thanks for asking about my background. So I'm Greek, as if you couldn't tell by my name. So I was born and raised in Greece, and family moved to America when I was 11 years old. I ended up going to UCLA, fine institution. Then I ended up getting my PhD in psychology. And I began a private practice as a clinical psychologist. And I work with patients who struggle with depression, anxiety, stress, a lot of relationships issues, marriage counseling. And one of my expertise really was addictions. So I work with a lot of people that are struggling with addictions and to help them overcome them and live a healthy and happy life. And even though I was teaching them how to take care of themselves, I had one thing that I didn't do, which was I wasn't take care of myself. And after many, many years of full practice, morning, noon, and night, seeing patients, I got burned out. And I had to transition out of psychology, and that's when I entered the corporate world. So for the last 15 years, I've been working with senior executives, CEOs, HR executives in corporate wellness, in leadership training and development, and executive coaching. And next to that, I've also had an opportunity to write a couple of books. The first one being 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, which became a #1 bestseller here in America in the self-help category on Amazon. And then just last month, I co-authored a book called 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, because I saw the crisis coming with COVID, and I knew that I had to get a book out as quickly as possible. I called my best friend and writing partner, Konstantinos Apostolopoulos. How's that for a Greek name? And we wrote the book in 45 days, which I know is hard to believe. My first book actually took 3 years to write. So to get this book out, I couldn't have done it without him. He's a great partner. And basically, it's a practical guide to how to emotionally deal with pandemics and other disasters. So we'll be talking quite a bit about that during this time. When my first book came out, it really, when it became a #1 book, that opened up a lot of doors to me. I started speaking throughout the United States, and last year it expanded to Europe. I spoke in Paris and London and Athens and in Greece, where I'm from, which was great coming home. And now, of course, I want to bring that message to India and spread happiness and wellness, both personally, but also professionally. Obviously, we'll talk about how important it is to have happy employees and engaged employees. So that's kind of like my background, and there you have it.
Thank you, Dr. Elia. Spreading happiness is the most important mantra in today's life. Now, you mentioned about happiness being a very important thing in everybody's life. I just want to know why, and how can one bring happiness in their own lives?
The great Greek philosopher Aristotle said that happiness is the whole meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Wow, think about that statement, right? Happiness is the most important thing there is. And I'll tell you this, as I've had an opportunity to travel and speak throughout the world, I always ask the audience, right before I do anything else in my talks, if you were to ask any parent, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, religious background, socioeconomic status, what would you like for your children? What is the answer to that question? And the question is, I just want them to be, and then I physically take the mic and I point to the audience, and the audience goes back, happy, So that's a university. We all want our kids to be happy. That's what we want them, healthy and happy, basically. So I say that happiness is a choice, but you have to have the right information. And people say, well, why do you think that your book did so well? And honestly, and these are people, even friends of mine, my family, I didn't write anything that was so brand new that Aristotle and other philosophers didn't say thousands of years ago. I mean, happiness is, take care of yourself, express gratitude, forgiveness, passion, purpose, be kind, have healthy relationships, and, pretty much, and feed your spirit. I mean, those are the 7 paths to lasting happiness. But if you're to go and actually read the reviews on Amazon, you'll get an idea of why this particular book has done so well. And here's the reason why. At the end of every chapter, I have a couple of points for the for the audience to consider, for the readers to think about, to meditate on. And then I have a couple questions, and then I have what I call take action. And this is where the applicability of those concepts takes place. Why? Because knowledge without application is just education. In other words, you can go and read the top 10 books, right, on Amazon, the top 10 books on happiness, and you read them, and typically what do? We read the books, and then we highlight them, and we underline everything, right? And then when we're done, we take the book and we put it on the bookshelf, and nothing really changes. So now we know more about happiness, but our happiness state is the same as it was prior to that. And I believe more frustrated because now we have more knowledge. So the key to anything in life to be successful is to apply those things. And those take actions exercise that I have are based on my 30 years experience, both as a clinical psychologist in private practice and also as an executive coach. And, I know people, this is my job. I know people inside and out, and that comes easy to me. I don't know anything about technology. That's why I have you to help me out. But I do know people. And I give them the tools. First, I get to know them, then I give them the tools, and then I hold them accountable. So in some ways, I'm a happiness accountability coach. Maybe that's the best way to describe what I do. But happiness is definitely doable. And, we're dealing right now in the world, depression, anxiety, stress is up in an astonishing 800% just in the last 3 months alone. So people are struggling like they've never struggled before. And the things I will share with you today in both of those books are here to help people navigate and truly go from just surviving any crisis to thriving. I believe it's doable, and I believe you can be happy, but you have to do the work. I mean, there's no shortcuts in essence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elia. This was really, really very much informative. And I think you very clearly you mentioned that, okay, there is a definition of happiness and there is a journey to happiness. Yes, what we sometimes miss on is the gap between both the things, and you have very, very clearly bridged that gap and informed us and told us that what is the journey one has to take to be happy. And I think from both your books that you have, that journey is going to be very clear to our viewers. And of course, through this webinar and through what you right now mentioned, that particular thing is very, very clear to our viewers. So another thing that you very wisely mentioned, that there is a set of intellectuals who are there, and that technology today is something that is bringing and that is bridging the gap between the intellectual and the entire globe. And I think Beyond Imagination is one such aspect, one such platform wherein people are actually coming, and that happiness quotient is increasing amongst them through technology. So this is the biggest example, and this is the live example, real-time example where we are right now, and we've been watched across the globe. You are sitting in US, we are sitting in India, we have people from multiple countries that I mentioned initially also, like Uzbekistan, I said wow also for that, and that people are sitting here from watching us from UK also. So in a nutshell, that entire platform has come together, the intellectual and the happiness quotient has come together through the technology. And digital world Beyond the Imagination is also supporting you, of course, in bridging such gap. So we have one question from Mr. Abhinav Sharma. He is the Senior Vice President in a company called Recruit, and he's very curious to know, and especially after listening to you, I'm sure he's very curious to know that how did you become a happiness expert? Over to you, sir.
So that's funny you asked that question. How did I become a happiness expert? I get asked that all the time, actually. So here's the story. I happened to start my happiness journey on the very first day I was born. Rohit, you might say, but Dr. Elia, how's that possible? Here's the back story to that. So I was born a long time ago in Athens, Greece. You know, back in the day when nobody was allowed in the birthing room except for my mom, obviously, and the doctor. So as the story was told to me growing up in my home, my dad shows up, you know, kind of tough Greek guy with his drink and his cigar and all that stuff. He comes up to the nurse and says, you know, nurse, there was a little window, 5 little babies, they all had the same, back in the day, white generic blanket, so we kind of all look the same. My dad goes up to the window, asks the nurse, says, nurse, which one's my son? And I guess at that moment I had a big smile on my face. So the nurse turns to my dad and says, your son, he's the happy one. And boom, I was branded the happy one. So growing up, I've been told, well, you came out of the womb happy. You've always been happy, basically. Yeah, that's how I kind of lived my life. Now, here's the interesting thing. Fast forward 25 years, now I'm in graduate school, and I remember the professors talking to us about the difference between nature and nurture. In other words, how are we made up, our personalities? Is it a genetic predisposition, or is it our environment? And of course, that gets debated all the time, and the truth is that, you know, both play a big role in it. And I had this terrible thought. I'm like, wait a minute. What if my dad gets stuck in traffic, shows up like 15 minutes late, comes up to the same nurse, same little window, and says, which one's my son? And at that point, I'm having this terrible gas pains, and my stomach's hurting, and I'm screaming my head off, and my face is all red like this, you know. And the nurse turns to my dad, she goes, your son, he's the cranky one. And then I'm raised being told, you know, you came out of the womb cranky, you've been a miserable little beep, you know. And that's how I grow up. So why is this important? Because this has to do with our personal brand. There's some brands, like the happy one is a great brand, honestly. And I've embraced that throughout my life. Even though I've had tragedies in my life, I lost parents young, I've had all kinds of things happen to me, I've still maintained that happiness for the most part. Not perfect, obviously, but you know what I mean. But there are other brands that are positive. For example, you know, the creative one, the beautiful one, the kind one, the loving one. The athletic one, the smart one, you know, we have a lot of other brands like that are positive. So, and we've all been branded, by the way, typically, you know, pretty early on in our lives, most likely in our homes, or our more intimate environment. So, for the audience, if you have a positive brand, just count your blessings and say, man, am I lucky that I have that? However, there's a flip side to it, and it's a terrible side. And mind you, I've lectured and I've taught this in front of thousands and thousands of people throughout the world. Here's a lot of the feedback that I've received. There are brands that are terrible. There are people that have brands that are so awful, I'm not even going to repeat them in this interview, but I will tell you the 3 worst. And unfortunately, most of these tend to be towards women. And because most of my clients have been women, certainly when I was as a clinical psychologist. And those 3 brands are the following: fat, ugly, and stupid. Now you might say, well, who would ever say that to their kids or to their, believe me, you have no idea how many people have this negative self-image as a result of those brands. So several years ago, I'm giving this talk in a women's conference. There were about 500 women and myself in the state of North Carolina, America. And I'm kind of going through, just like I shared with you just now, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this older lady in her 70s get up and she starts kind of waving her arms. So she kind of like interrupted my talk. And I'm like, yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? And she goes, you know, after listening to you, I want to make a change, because I had just issued this challenge to the audience. I'm like, if you do not like your brand, now today's the day to empower them to change their brand today. So she stops and she goes, you know, for 70 years, this is really important, 7 decades. She says, I have been called ugly, fat, and stupid, and then some other words. And I was shocked, honestly, and everything got so quiet, like you could hear a pin drop. All the women, I couldn't believe how vulnerable this lady was. And it caught me off guard, honestly. At first, I didn't know what to do. And I said, well, ma'am, you know, well, what would you like your brand to be, the new brand? And her name was Leah, by the way, for her first name. She goes, well, from now on, I want to be known as Princess Leia. And I'm like, yes, your majesty, you know, kind of Princess Leia from Star Wars. And, you know, I bowed down to her majesty and everybody laughed. And it was this great scene, everybody relaxed. But I've thought about this for a long time. If a woman at the age of 70 plus can change her brand as she doesn't like it and is empowered to do so, then anybody else can do that. And that's the important takeaway. That's the important lesson for this.
Very well together put, sir. Very, very well together. And I really like your wittiness in this, in explaining this answer. And I must say that you've been very fortunate enough, and everybody wished to become like that, attending, giving a conference with 500 audience, and all of them were being women. So that was, I aspire to do something like that in the near future. And I really, really like the idea of change of that 70-year-old woman whom you met. And I also want to change certain things. And I'll share this. Audience are listening to us. And I also want to become a rock star. I want to play guitar. And I'm sure that after this webinar and after listening to you and getting so much of adrenaline rush on happiness, I'm sure I'll be able to play guitar. Now, it's really fortunate to have people like you who are like giving so much of the journey, who are covering the journey of happiness. And it's really honor, really honor. Now, I'll move to the questions that we are being floating on our page right now on the chat button. Now, Miss Ashima Oberoi from New Delhi wants to ask this question regarding a recent incidents that happened in India in the Bollywood fraternity regarding one of the very young and aspiring and promising actor, Mr. Sushant Singh Rajput. He was under immense depression because of certain things, certain issues and all. And she wants to ask that everybody is shocked. So, she's also writing here that everybody is shocked that how things have, we lost that person, we lost that celebrity, and how such things have happened in spite of such a happiness being spread across, and people are going under such immense depression. Because this whole thing, I'm happy that somebody has asked such kind of a question, that how such kind of a depression has led to such a big and humongous action in somebody's life, and that to a person who's being very successful. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I read the news too. This is a tragic loss for India. This young man, only 34 years old. It's a terrible loss for Bollywood. He was a rising star. Think about all the future that he had in front of him and all the things he could have accomplished, not just in entertainment, but in his own personal life and so on. So it's a tragic loss. And yes, the world is struggling. Like I said before, we have an 800% increase in depression, anxiety, and stress-related symptoms. Of course, when somebody gets to the point of where they take their own life, tragic beyond belief, and I've had friends that have done that, and I know so many people who have a family member that they've lost to suicide. I always think about that. To me, suicide is like a permanent solution to a temporary crisis or to a temporary problem. And I was very, very fortunate, even though I work with thousands of people, I was very fortunate that nobody committed suicide on my watch as a clinical psychologist for 18 years. I was so afraid of that it's one of those things that just would keep me up at night. I had so many close calls with certain clients that would have, a lot of self-defeating thoughts and self-destructive behaviors. They got close, but luckily they, to their credit, we had a very trusting relationship, I guess you could say. I had a lot of phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. They were doing terrible things to themselves. There were a few times that I had to put him in the hospital, kind of in a psychiatric facility. A few times against their will, which is not an easy thing to do for me as a psychologist. That wasn't easy for me to do, but I had to protect them from themselves so they wouldn't hurt themselves. And sometimes they were very upset with me. But then when they would, when their right mind came back again, they were very grateful that I did that to protect them. But it's tragic. I'm sorry for his family. I'm really sorry for India and for Bollywood for losing such a fine young man at such an early age. His whole life really was ahead of him. So, depression is real. The stressors we're facing right now are unprecedented because you don't only have the pandemic and the mental health crisis, you also have the financial stress. So many people unemployed or underemployed, fearful, not knowing what if they're going to have a job next week, even if the ones that do have a job. And that isn't just in India; it's in America. It's across the world. This crisis. So yeah, this is really tough, and I'm just really sorry for your loss.
So I think very nicely put together, and I'm sure that Ashima has got the right answer in a very rightly put together statements. And I must say, after listening to you, you are in a very noble, cause-oriented job, wherein you very rightly mentioned that how people were calling you at like 2 o'clock in the night, and then you were taking care of those people, talking to them, and like you very wisely said that your actual enemy is yourself only, with whom you are fighting, with whom you are having a battle, and that nick of time is something that actually leads to this kind of a action which actually ruins the person, of course, the family, and in the case that we just spoke about, the entire fraternity of Bollywood, and the fan following, of course, which actually is left spellbound after such kind of an incident. Like you very rightly said, this is not the permanent solution to the temporary problem, because phases keep moving on, phases keep changing like a weather, but stopping it, putting a full stop right after all these things is not the solution. Honestly speaking, thanks to this question also, I think you very rightly put together, and I'm really, honestly telling you, I'm really impressed to see your knowledge for Bollywood and India also. That's really commendable, sir. So this leads us to a very serious topic that nowadays has become a kind of a pandemic crisis itself, and everybody is worried about this across the globe, be it any of the countries. And what we spoke about the celebrity in the last question, that is also another example of mental health crisis. So mental health has actually started taking a toll on everybody's life, especially after the pandemic coming up. So what is your take on that?
I just want to add one more thing about the suicide of this young man or other people that commit suicide. Oftentimes they feel like the world would be better off without them, which obviously is not true, but that's how they feel at that moment. And if there's anybody struggling with those kind of thoughts, if you have any kind of suicidal thoughts, please, I beg you to reach out to somebody, either a professional or somebody you truly trust. You might feel like you're not very lovable right now, you feel so low, why would anybody really care? But believe me, there are people that care about you. Don't make that same choice that this young man made. There's good reasons why we need to live and fight for our happiness, and don't give up. We're here to help. I know the suicide hotline, at least in America anyway, the phone calls are going through the roof. We're having numbers we've never seen before. So there's so many people, like I said, struggling, but there is help. And there are tools that can help you overcome depression, anxiety, and so on. And so choose to live. It's hard no matter what, though. And my heart goes out to all those that struggle.
That's right, sir, because reaching out to people is very important, because some people are introverts, some people are extrovert. And I also believe very strongly that introvert people, they just try and be in their cocoons, and they do not prefer going out and prefer talking to people for taking this small help. People can go for small problems that they have, any small disease that they have, but they are not reaching out to the right people for seeking help with respect to mental crisis. So that comes to the next question, which is asked by Kavalpreet from Chandigarh. And Kavalpreet is asking, so she's working in an MNC, and she's saying that I want to ask you that how can we better, how can we make it better for, do better to take care of ourselves and our employees in an organization?
So Rohit, I think what you're asking is how can people, help? Everybody's so overwhelmed. Everybody's so overwhelmed, right? So in the midst of all that, how can people help members of their families or their colleagues at work, or if you own a company, your employees, if you're an HR director, what can you do to help those in need? Because people coming back to work right now, are seriously suffering from post-traumatic stress across the globe. And they're already traumatized to some degree, and now they have to go back to work and be productive and do all those things. So what can we do to help? I will tell you this. I'm a spiritual person, and I believe that we need to listen, to get very, very quiet and listen to what I call that still small voice. Some people might call it your intuition or your inner wisdom. You know, I kind of call it your connection to divinity in some ways. Listen. So when I hear you need to call Rohit, I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to call you. I'm like, hey brother, how you doing today? And I think we need to go beyond just asking how somebody's doing. At least here where I come from in America, everybody says, I'm fine. Everybody's fine all the time, which is not true, but that's the automatic answer. I actually close the door and I look somebody in the eyes and said, no, I'm asking, how are you really doing? Now, it's between you and I. Nobody else has to know. How are you truly doing? And then what you end up having, the walls go down and the defenses go down and people open up and they're vulnerable and they begin to share with you how they're doing. So, and if you get that prompting, like I said, text, email, pick up the phone, get on a Zoom call and say, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about you. How are you doing? How's your family? What's going on? What can I do to help? The worst thing that you could get back in return is like, no, I'm actually doing okay. I don't need any help right now, but if I do, I know I can count on you. But more likely than not, people are going to open up and say, you know what? Man, I've been really struggling. I feel so out of control. There's so many things I don't control. My whole life, like we don't even know what the fall is going to be like. Is this thing going to get worse? I know the numbers in India with COVID-19 are continuing to increase. The latest projections, as I've read them yesterday, were that India is not going to peak until the end of July. Well, that's another 45 days, and we don't even know if that's true. And what is going to happen in the fall, and what's going to happen in the winter? None of us truly know. So human beings do not like to being out of control, right? And we have this collection of all countries and nationalities that struggle with that. So on an individual basis, I think we need to step up our own game and just reach out to people, tell them that we're thinking about them. That's the first and most basic thing to do. And then if you hear something, then act upon it. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore that prompting.
Thank you, sir. Now, next question is related to your book that you have written. So I've read it, but I want for all our viewers, all our audience, and from the team Beyond Imagination, I wish to ask this thing from you, that what are the 4 personality types when it comes to dealing with the crisis?
Yes, I love that question. What are the 4 personality types during a crisis? And by the way, when we talk about crisis, it's not just about COVID-19. It could be about anything. It could be a personal crisis, a financial crisis, a relationship crisis. So here are the 4 personality types. The first one we like to call the victim. And the victim looks at any crisis, why is this happening to me? Like, poor me, it's all about me. I feel bad about myself, I get depressed, I'm down, just poor me basically. That's the victim mode. The second one is what we call the critic. Now the critic, it doesn't matter what the federal, the state or local authorities or the healthcare professionals, whether it's the World Health Organization or the United Nations, it doesn't matter who says what. They criticize everything. For example, Rohit, you know what? You should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Rohit, you shouldn't wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid too. Like, no matter what you say, they criticize everything. And they do nothing but criticize. That's number 2. The third personality type, we like to call the bystander. And the bystander, a good person, mind you, but so overwhelmed by all these different things that are going on. In English, in America, we have this saying, it's like the deer with the headlights look. So, when there's a car coming, a deer just freezes up. That's the bystander. They don't know what to do. They look to the left, they look to the right, they look what the neighbor's doing. They can't figure out, they do nothing basically. They just sit frozen in fear. And what all 3 of these personalities have in common is what? None of them take action that's positive and productive. And they offer no solutions. The victim doesn't do it, the critic certainly doesn't do it, and neither does the bystander. Now, we get to the fourth personality type, which we like to call the Navigator. And the Navigator, first of all, begins, and this is the whole premise of the book, 7 Keys to Navigating in Crisis. The Navigator begins with a positive attitude, basically saying, you know, I know this is tough, and yeah, maybe I've lost my job or whatever, but I know I'm going to overcome this. Always positive attitude, like there is a solution. The Navigator takes care of himself or herself, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They take care of themselves because they know that's important. They listen. You know, when we talked about before, listening to, you know, the connection either to divinity or to their intuition, or they listen and they get quiet and they meditate and they listen for that inner wisdom. And, you know, the Navigator is also flexible and adaptable. This is a huge part, by the way, to be flexible and adaptable during any crisis. They prepare, they take initiative, they have a positive attitude, and ultimately, in the end, the Navigator actually performs what we like to call acts of kindness or acts of service, because when we're helping somebody else, we feel better about ourselves. Now, you might say, but Elia, my life is so terrible right now. I can't help anybody else. And I've heard this before. I promise you, there's somebody in your neighborhood, in your community, in your town, in your city, in your company, in your department, in your division, on your team, that actually has it worse than you. All you got to do is look around. Somebody else has it worse than you do. And then perform an act of kindness and an act of service to them. That's what navigators do. So I'm asking everybody that's listening right now, become a navigator. Now, having said all that stuff, all four of those types exist within each human being. There isn't one human being that doesn't have all four of those qualities, right? Myself included, mind you. So when this whole pandemic came, did I have the bystander approach? And what, did I feel like a victim? When all my talks got canceled overnight, I started getting emails, canceled. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? Because I really had no idea what to do. Why is this happening to me? I mean, I kind of went through the same emotions. And have I been critical? Yeah, there's some things that I've heard on social media or even from television, from the authorities, that I think are downright stupid. I do. However, and here's the key, I didn't stay stuck there. I listened. I felt like we had to write this book. I called my best friend. I'm like, Coach Khan, that's his nickname. We need to write this book. Are you in or are you out? And he said, I'm in. And then in 45 days, we got this book out, which I know, trust me, that my first book, 3 years to write. It was an impossible task, but with this help, and I feel like help from above, however you want to call it, we got the book out and we became productive and we navigated. So remember, it's not if you're a victim or critic or a bystander, but don't stay there for too long. Do it for an hour or two. Get out of your system and then get back into being productive and taking initiative, taking care of yourself and becoming a navigator. And if you do that, you will have a very successful life and I think a very happy life as well.
So that moves to our next question, that what specific tips do you have for our viewers, for us, to treating ourselves in a better manner?
Yeah, this is a great question. I mean, HR professionals right now are struggling mightily as the economy opens up again in different parts of the world, and they're facing some major challenges. The first one, and I guess it makes a lot of sense, is really ensuring the mental and physical well-being of the employees as they're coming back. Remember, you got employees that are struggling big time. Some of them don't even want to come back to work physically because they're scared. I've already seen that already, where you have meetings being called and you have some employees that wear masks and others that don't want to wear masks. At least here in America, I don't know if it's the same thing in India, and it creates the following dilemma for HR. So the people that are wearing masks basically are saying, look, I don't feel comfortable in being in the same room and I don't feel like you're being sensitive, to me. I think you should be wearing a mask. The other folks are going, well, you know what? Don't tell me what to do. I want to live my life the way I want to, and I don't want to wear a mask. And HR is kind of stuck in between. So the way that I approach that specifically is this, especially to HR executives, I say this, there's a big difference between danger and fear. So danger is real. If somebody comes up to you and coughs in your face, Rohit, you are in danger. There's no doubt about that. Fear, on the other hand, is not your friend. We don't want to make decisions, corporate decisions or HR decisions based on fear. So we do have to create certain processes that actually honor and protect, especially those that are vulnerable, have compromised immune systems and so on, but not give a way to fear and make this grand major decision that will impact the entire workforce. So that's a big one. And here's the interesting thing: 91% of people feel like the employer is responsible for helping employees with their mental health challenges. Think about what I just said, 91%. However, the reality is that only 30% feel like employers do that. So there's this huge gap of 60% basically that feel like, you know what, my physical, mental, and emotional needs as an employee are not being addressed by my employer. So we really have to fix that. This is part of the crisis with the mental health crisis that we're having, because this is an epidemic. And this is what I do. I come in as a corporate wellness expert to companies and help them figure out solutions specifically, because every industry is different and every company, depending on the size, is different, and help them create the solutions so every employee feels safe and therefore can be more productive, as long as they don't have to worry about that aspect. But most companies don't do that, or they really don't know how to do it. And that's what 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis is all about. So that's challenge number 1. Basically, this question that you asked me is an entire webinar by itself. So, that's the first challenge. The second challenge really is maintaining, employee engagement and productivity and effectiveness in the midst of this. Because again, people are traumatized, people are scared, people are reluctant to even come into work, some of them, on the one hand. On the other hand, from the C-suite, from the CEOs and the business owners and the senior leaders, what you end up having is this. They are 2 or 3 months behind because the economy shut down. So revenue-wise, they're way, way behind. So now they have to work harder. They want their employees to work harder. So leadership has to show up completely different. They can't say, we got to hit those numbers by the 25th of the month, or else your job is in jeopardy. No, they have to show up and say, look, we're all in this together. The reason why we have to hit those numbers by the 25th of the month is this, because I don't want to have to lay anybody off. If we don't hit those numbers, I may have to lay off 10 to 15% of the workforce, and we're all a family here in this company. I want everybody to have a job next month. So senior leaders have to show up with a lot more vulnerability, a lot more honesty. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Business as usual. If people think they can do the exact same thing they did prior to COVID-19, they're sadly mistaken. We have to do things completely different. So that's challenge number 2. The third one is really try to create kind of an ecosystem between, working from home and coming to work. There's a good portion of the population that is not going to come to work, I don't think, in 2020. They're going to work from home. So we have to figure out how can we do that. Again, depending on the industry, like I said, this is a big discussion. So that's challenge number 3. Challenge number 4 is really how do we deal with this new normal that we're facing, which is unprecedented in the workforce. And I think the 5th, and final challenge is how do we protect the employment and really preserve the livelihood, like I said before, because yes, companies need to be productive and they need to be profitable on the one hand. On the other hand, we got a scared populace, scared employees, and those two need to come together, united as a team. So anyway, great question. I can talk about this for hours, but like I said, this is probably an entire webinar or training and leadership training and HR training by itself. Great question, though. Thanks for asking that.
So I think very nicely put together, and you clubbed all the points very nicely and very wisely. We have all, amongst our audience, we have HR heads, we have CXOs of the companies, CEOs of the company, directors of the companies. And this is specially for them, that I want to make them understand that all your employees, all your manpower, even if they are into grievances, personal, professional, or any problem they are facing, then Beyond Imagination is there. Dr. Elia is there for them to resolve all the problems, to connect with them, providing them all the trainings at all instances, at all stages. We have technology in place, we have all the platforms in place which can be used to empower the employees, to make sure that the employees are living in a very happy employment, happy employee level, and they are enjoying the things that they are doing in the organization. So this is especially, I reiterate this especially for all the HR heads, for all the directors, all the CXOs, CEOs of the companies who are watching us as the audience of this global webinar. So now, after talking about the employees, we always have this questions in our minds. We keep talking about these things, that forgiveness is the end result to happiness. So that comes to the next question: why forgiveness is so vital for happiness and, of course, for wellness?
Yeah, I love that question because forgiveness is such a great attribute of happiness. There's no way I can be happy if I don't have forgiveness in my heart for you. And even more importantly, if I don't forgive myself. And we'll talk about self-forgiveness in a minute. Gandhi said that forgiveness is the attribute of the strong, which is one of my all-time favorite quotes. Why? Because it does take strength to forgive other people. Believe me, I've worked with people that haven't forgiven themselves or somebody else, and they've carried all that bitterness and resentment inside for over 50 years. You heard me right. I work with people that have not forgiven for 50 years. So forgiveness is freedom, because when I forgive, I'm free. I don't carry all that dead weight with me. I also believe that forgiveness is a choice. We have to make a choice. I choose to forgive you, and I choose to forgive myself. And I think forgiveness takes practice. It's not easy. One of the things that people who have read my 7 Paths Lasting Happiness book have told me repeatedly is this, I love that part because you really taught me in the take action at the end of the chapter on forgiveness about how to do it. I usually ask people, write a list of all the things you haven't forgiven yourself for. And it could be 50 things, 100 things, or 10 things. And then give them a grade or give them a number on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 would be the easiest stuff. Oh, I made a silly mistake yesterday. Oh, no big deal. To 10, some major mistake that I made in my life. And rank each one of them. So then I asked them to go through the process and to begin the process of forgiving themselves. What's interesting to me is that some people start with easy stuff. They're like, man, if I can forgive myself for the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, then I can gain some momentum, I can feel better about myself, and then I can move on to the tougher and tougher things until I get to that 10 in the end. However, there's some personalities, especially business types, and especially people in leadership positions, like type A personalities, like CEOs. I work with a lot of the C-suite. You know what they do? They start with the 10s first. Because like Elia, if I can forgive myself with a 10, then everything else is going to be easy after that. Because I've had to, I've had this issue in my life for, all these years. And it's time for me to forgive myself. So forgiveness takes practice. Forgiveness is necessary. Think about the impact that would have in our homes if we forgave one another, with our spouses, with our kids. Think about the impact it would have at work if a colleague, or even your boss, or even a direct report who made a mistake because they're new in this position and they don't know the tasks very well. If we were able to extend forgiveness for them and turn it into a learning lesson, think about what a difference that culture would have if it was a forgiving culture, or if it was a forgiving family. This world would be a whole different place. But really, forgiveness starts with who? Right here, it starts with me. I need to forgive myself in order to forgive others as well. Great question. I can talk about forgiveness for a long time. Thanks for asking that.
Dr. Elia, I think you've explained forgiveness very wisely, and very rightly you said that forgiveness has to come from within. Sometimes what we think is that forgiveness has to be given by the elder person to the younger one, or younger one to the elder one. And we keep fighting with that thought every time in our minds. But forgiveness is a reciprocation of an action, is something that we need to understand in our mindsets, in our subconscious. So very wisely put, and I'm great that you gave example of Gandhi ji also, that he spoke about forgiveness. So that was a very well put together thought kind of a thing that you had. So that moves us to the next question, that why knowing the purpose in life is very important for mankind.
Yeah, knowing your purpose in life is vitally important to your happiness, and here's the reason why. When you discover, and I'm not saying everybody has discovered their purpose in life just yet, but when you do, what happens as a result of that, you go about your work and you go about your life with passion, which is the energy that drives that purpose. I was fortunate, I believe, because I learned that, I would say even back in high school, that part of my purpose in life was really to help other people. And basically, I've devoted my entire life doing that. It's really what inspires me is to make a difference in somebody else's life. And if you want to know the truth, that I guess the seed was planted when I was 5 years old. My grandpa, whose name I carry and I honor, said to me, I was like a little kid, 5 years old, and he died soon after that. So this is the last memory that I have of my grandpa. He said, "You know what, grandson?" He said, "If you do something good for somebody else every day, you're going to have a happy life." Very simple, and it made a lot of sense. It just resonated with my heart. So, through high school and then as an adult and then in my professional life and personal life, I try to help people wherever I can, because it does make me feel better. And I think there's a direct correlation between kindness and happiness. First of all, happy people by nature, I think, go out and help other people, and they're kind, just because that's what they do. On the flip side, when you perform acts of kindness and service, it makes you feel good inside. It makes you feel happy inside. So I say, with kindness and happiness, you can't have one without the other. Those two are connected. But that was, my purpose in life. Everybody needs to discover what their purpose in life is. I've had way too many clients that I work with who are in their 40s or 50s who come to my office for some coaching, and they hate their lives. They have devoted 20, 30 years. I'm talking about even people who are very successful, even leaders of industries and leaders of companies and so on, who are just miserable beyond belief because they have not found their purpose in life. And although money is good and money is necessary for us, money by itself doesn't bring anybody any happiness. I know way too many people that have way too much money that are downright miserable. So finding your purpose, sometimes you have to go outside of your comfort zone and try something new. But once you find it, you'll know it. And it just feels really good inside. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but to me, people that are in alignment with their purpose, you add the passion to it, which is the energy that drives that, they really never work a day in their lives. They would do this even if they weren't getting paid, because they love it so much. So if you can do that, I promise you will be much, much happier in life. No doubt.
That's really helpful, sir. Now, that brings to our next question. So I'll just give a precursor to that everybody has a inner demon inside. There is a good boy, there is a bad boy kind of a thing. So the question is that how do you deal with the inner critique, the inner self-critique every time?
Okay, first of all, everyone has an inner critic. If there's someone that says, "No, I don't have an inner critic," they're lying to you. We all have it. The question is, to what degree does the inner critic impact one's life? Because the inner critic is not your friend. And I have people visualize that when life started, they were giving the keys to a brand new car, their favorite car, whatever that is. If it could be a Ferrari, it could be a van, it could be a truck, whatever the car is. And basically the car is symbolic of their life. And they were given this car, I'm like, okay, drive it well. So initially, we're in the driver's seat, right? We're in control. But as the inner critic begins to creep in, you're not good enough, you make mistakes, because human nature is what? We always make mistakes, right? That's pretty typical. I would venture to say on a daily basis, we'll make some kind of mistake. And the inner critic pounces on that. So the more the inner critic gains strength, now you go from being the driver, now you're the passenger, you're next. And as the inner critic continues to erode your self-worth and your self-esteem, at some point you go from the front, the passenger, in the back seat. And then if the inner critic totally overwhelms you, guess what? You end up being in the trunk, and your life is completely careening out of control. You have no idea. Your life is going off the rails, as they say. So people say, "Well, Elia," I ask my clients, I said, "What do you think you are?" You would be surprised how many people said, "I'm in the trunk. I've been beating myself for 20, 30, 40 years. You remember the personal branding too, right? If it's a negative personal brand, you're probably back there. Some people say, "Well, I'm in the back seat." Well, the goal is to get from the trunk or the back seat to the front at least. At least now you're closer to your destiny. You're closer to where your life is going. And at some point you have to grab the steering wheel and take over and be in control of your life again. So people say, well, that's easier said than done. How do you actually do that? And there's a way to do it. I have people go through this meditation where they visualize that they're like a judge, wearing this black robe, and they're the judge. And every time they hear a negative, critical voice, they use a gavel, which is like this wooden thing, and you pound it and you say, overruled. I choose not to believe you. The more we do that, the more we gain control of our lives. And I've asked my clients, what percentage do you think of your life does the inner critic run? You know what the record is? One guy told me 97%. He was 97% critical. His wife and his kids actually validated that. They said he from the minute he wakes up in the morning, the minute he goes to bed at night, he criticizes himself and everybody else. By the way, if somebody's critical towards you, rest assured they have a very strong inner critic. Because when people don't have an inner critic or a very small voice, they have no reason to criticize anybody else. And you can see that at work. Go to work and find someone who's very, very critical. I promise you, deep down inside, they have a very tough critic themselves. So the more that we do that, the goal, of course, is to regain control of our lives. It's not that the inner critic ever goes quiet completely. I mean, I make mistakes from time to time. Luckily, he's under control. I'm like, yeah, I heard what you have to say, but listen, when we make mistakes, we have a choice. We can beat ourselves up or we can learn from it. And if you learn from that, then actually your mistakes become your guides in some ways. Believe me, I think I've learned more from the mistakes I've made in my life from things that did not work out than from things that have worked out or have worked out easily. But the inner critic is not your friend. And it definitely erodes from somebody's self-worth and self-esteem, can cause depression, can cause, all these self-defeating thoughts. For some people, it becomes self-destructive behaviors. And then if that continues on, we even have people obviously that take their own lives because of that, because they feel so poorly about themselves. So that's how you combat the inner critic. Great question, by the way. And we need to be mindful and alert and aware when those negative voices take place in our minds. And then basically use the gavel and say, overruled, I choose not to believe you. And that's how you get rid of the inner critic. Or you diminish the voice, I guess. Maybe you don't quite get rid of it completely.
That's very much true. The inner voices, one has to be definitely inert. One has to be conscious. One has to be alert every time when they get such kind of inner voices. And now let's move to the next question, coming back to the pandemic, current situation that we have. The question is that, how do you think the world leaders are going to be performing, how are going to be moving forward when the world reopens again?
Yeah, as the economies of the world open up again, leaders, business owners, heads of organizations and departments and divisions or companies need to show up differently than in the pre-COVID world. What do we mean by that? Employees are coming back and they're in a whole different mental state as I shared with you earlier. Depression, anxiety, stress, uncertainty, lack of control, all of those things contribute. And leaders need to, if there was ever a time, let's put it this way, if there was ever a time for them to increase their emotional intelligence as leaders, to empathize, to be understanding, to over-communicate, now is the time to do that. Because business as usual no longer works. Remember that one of the 7 keys to navigating a crisis is to be flexible and adaptable. Leaders need to be navigators in essence. They need to take care of themselves in order to take care of their employees. They need to understand how important their employees' mental and emotional health is more than ever before. I know that sounds like a grand statement, but it's actually a factual statement. And they need to explain where the company is at. They need to be more transparent and more open. For some people, that's uncomfortable. But I tell you this, in order to get buy-in from the workforce, you have to do those things. That's not maybe I should do it, maybe I shouldn't do it. I think it's mandatory. In the end, as you take care of your employees, because I want you to really think about that, happy employees are more engaged. Happy employees are physically healthier, meaning that they have less time off work because they know how to take care of themselves. Happy employees are more creative, they're more innovative, they're better team members, they're better teammates, and in some ways lift up the rest of the team because their energy is up and they're positive, obviously. And in the end, happy employees are more productive. And all of those things have a direct impact on the bottom line. And happy employees ultimately make companies more profitable. You know, they're more loyal. Happy employees are great ambassadors. I want you to also think about that. When somebody's happy at work, they go out and they proclaim, I love working for this company, or I love working for, you know, my boss or the CEO. Why? And then they go out and they basically do the marketing for you. And they are the best resource. If you're a business owner, it's the best resource to have happy employees because they will go out and recruit other top talent that's out there. And think of how difficult it is to recruit good talent when the labor market is tight. So anyways, they just have to show up differently. They have to lead it differently. That's a lot of times that's why they bring me in for as an executive coach. I help them to do that. For some leaders, it comes natural. For others, it's difficult to do. They have to go outside of their comfort zone to lead in a new way. And ultimately, as the former CEO of Apple once said, I hire smart people not to tell them what to do. I hire smart people so they can tell me what to do. And that's the approach leaders need to take. Surround themselves with a great team and good mentors and trusted advisors. And because this is the new normal. And some people say, I hate hearing that term, new normal. Well, guess what? You got to get used to it because new normal will become the new normal. Things will change. In the fall, we're going to have a whole new, you know, who knows what the fall will bring. Next winter could be a very difficult winter. And this comes from someone who's an optimist, who's for the most part happy and positive thinking and so on, but I'm also realistic. We're facing some unprecedented things. COVID, mental health crisis, economic crisis, even social strife, and they all seem to be happening at the same time. So most companies are not, and individuals I would say, are not prepared for that. But we will get through it, and we will be better off for it as we make those adjustments necessary. Great questions. I really appreciate that. I could talk about leadership again all day long, but those 5 challenges the HR are facing, those are good ones to have discussions with their senior leaders and in the C-suite, definitely.
That's very big learning, sir, for us and all for our audience also, because like I said earlier also, we have people who are like HR heads, CXOs, CEOs who are attending our global webinar right now, and it's learning for each and every one of us. Now that moves us to a question that we have from Will Campbell. Will Campbell is an executive resident HR from RBS, United Kingdom. Okay, so Win asks us the question that what are the top 5 challenges in human resources that we are going to be facing now on?
Boy, share something from my book. There's a lot of information there, Rohit. I don't know where to start. The one thing that comes to mind is this, and that has to do with gratitude. Because there's no way somebody can be grateful on the one hand and depressed on the other side, right? Those things cannot coexist even physiologically in our brains. So people that live life with an attitude of gratitude tend to be happier. Now, having said that, I think I'm the most grateful person on the planet when everything is going well, right? It's easy to be grateful when things are working out. What's not easy, however, is when things are not working out, especially right now. And I share, one of the thoughts that I want to share with you is that everybody listening, everybody in India, everybody across the world, we are all graduates from the University of Adversity. What is the University of Adversity? What does that mean? Basically what it means, and I think the older you are, the longer you've lived on this earth, the higher the degree. When you're younger, maybe you haven't, you don't have as much adversity, but when you get older, well, I guarantee you, what does adversity look like? Okay, first of all of us are going to lose loved ones. Grandparents initially, at some point our parents, God forbid a sibling or a spouse or a best friend or a child, the worst loss, or a grandchild. So we're all going to face that kind of hardship because that's part of the mortal existence. We're all going to face some physical illness. It could be cancer or heart disease, diabetes, arthritis or something else, or maybe a mental health disorder. struggles with depression, anxiety, stress, like we talked about, it's up 800%. We're going to have relationship issues. Maybe a relationship doesn't work, and that's painful when that doesn't work, especially when you have love in your life. And we're gonna deal with financial stress, unemployment, underemployment. Think about this: how many hundreds of millions of people are out of work right now, where 3 months ago they had a job, now they got nothing. They have nothing, and some of them don't even have hope of coming back anytime soon. So they don't know how to live. So they, just struggling. So all of those things are part of the University of Adversity. So another question is, and I've been asked this, believe me, more times than I can count. So I can see how you can be grateful when things are going well. I don't understand how you can be grateful when you're facing this kind of adversity. Is that even possible? Are you joking with us, Dr. Elia? I mean, people say that. No, I'm not joking. I think it is possible. But you have to look at adversity as something that happens to everybody. So remember, don't go into the victim mode. Why is this happening to me? Poor me. And don't get critical and don't start blaming other people. I mean, you can do it for a short while, right? But move into the navigator mode. And the navigator mode is what? I'm going to face the adversity or the crisis with a positive attitude, with kindness in my heart for my fellow human beings. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to be flexible and adaptable, especially during crisis. But more than anything else, I'm going to try to find what is the gold in a crisis. Everything that has happened in my life personally, the most painful things, the things that didn't work out, businesses, partnerships that I tried to say, didn't work out. Loss of loved ones. I lost my mom really early on in my life. I was only 22 when my mom passed away to cancer. Devastating for me. All of those things have actually made me a better person, a stronger person. Would I wish I could go back in time and change some of those things? Of course I would want to have my mom here so she can see her grandkids grow up and see what wonderful, young men they've become and so on. Obviously I would want that. But at the same time, her loss taught me about empathy, taught me about when I work with people, as a clinical psychologist, work with people that have those losses, I could empathize with them, I could understand them, I could feel what they feel. So in some ways, even though as terrible as that was, it helped me. And my mom's parting words, the last thing she said to me before she died, Elia, she said, I'm going to be just fine. I just want you to be happy. And that has been a guideline throughout my entire life. Those words of my mom from, over 3 decades ago, echo in my mind. I think about her all the time. I miss her. I have a feeling one day, hopefully I'm going to get to see her again. I mean, I believe that in some fashion, some form. I don't know exactly how. But all the adversity that I have faced, it has taught me something. Now, if we don't learn something from adversity, then clearly that's very painful. Try to find the lesson in something, in your mistakes, in your adversity. Even if you're struggling right now, say, what am I supposed to learn from this? And if you find that, then that's golden. That will help you a lot in your life. But yeah, I love the question. Thanks for asking that question.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure Mr. Campbell has got all the answers to what he asked for regarding the challenges in HR. And Mr. Campbell, I'm sure you have got all the answers by Dr. Elia. And now that moves us to the last but not the least, because this was very informative session that we had. Now, Dr. Elia, I want to ask you that what are your final thoughts? What are your final learnings that you would like to share with all our audience and team at Beyond Imagination?
My final thoughts are, number one, thank you for this interview. Thank you for asking all these great questions. I appreciate them. It's great to bring all these things to India. It's a country that I have a deep desire to get to know even better. It's always fascinated me. I come from an ancient culture like Greece, and India has this wonderful ancient culture and its diversity and its beauty. So I hope to get to see you in person one of these days. Hopefully when this whole thing, COVID, passes on. My final thoughts are just a reminder that happiness is a choice. If you have the right tools, apply those tools, because just reading about it or listening to it is not enough. We actually have to do the work. Remember that there's somebody else in your neighborhood, in your community, in your company, in your team, your division, that's probably struggling right now worse than you are. So go out of your way. Don't just be superficial in asking how they're doing, but really make eye contact, say, no, I would really want to know how you're doing. How are you doing really? And in my 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, I created a personal health inventory, which I like to present at some other time, of how people are doing physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Where in 2 minutes you can actually get a very clear indication in all these 4 different areas of your life how you're doing, and will give you a lot of insights as to how to proceed forward, what your strengths are, because certainly in some areas you might be doing great, and basically some other areas that you're probably struggling, if you're honest, in answering the questions. So the personal health inventory is very powerful and very useful. So those are my final thoughts, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Elia. And we are really, really very grateful to you for sparing out time for us, for coming on this global webinar and sharing, I'm honestly telling you, sharing all these insightful things, talking about happiness, forgiveness, HR challenges, giving answers to all these questions that we keep looking for in our daily life, daily routine, but we don't get that right answers. So just to summarize, I want to say that I've taken a lot of learnings from what you have spoken about, but definitely like that 70-year-old woman who stood up amongst the 500 women whom you were addressing, I'm also one of the person who's taken so many insights, so many learnings from you, and I'm definitely going to change multiple things and imbibe them, ensure that I'm taking care of them in my future, and definitely I'm going to become a rock star by learning guitar, just on a lighter note. And to all the people who have attended this webinar, all the HR heads, CXOs, CEOs, directors of the companies, we are here to answer all your queries. You can answer us, leave your questions in the comment sections. You can email us at our Beyond Imagination email ID, which is given here. And if you have any questions with Dr. Elia, then Dr. Elia will also answer them. Now, we would like to apprise you with the fact that we are collaborating with the Happiness Center for CEO coaching, HR trainings, corporate trainings, happiness training for all of you audience who have come, who are HR heads, directors of the companies, and who are working, or who are the CEOs also of the companies, and we are coming up and collaborating with the Happiness Center for coming up with these kind of sessions. Now, any question that you have, any query that you have, we have given all the correspondence, all the call to actions here, and you can reach us anytime, and our team from Beyond Imagination will connect with you and answer to all your queries there. Last but not the least, I would really like to thank Dr. Elia for coming here on this platform and educating us about the happiness, about multiple topics that we discussed, answering all the questions that we had. Now, anyone who's interested in buying the books of Dr. Elia, which are written by Dr. Elia, they can visit our page and also see the description area in this particular video, and you can buy the books from here itself. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more informational videos around all the topics, all the informational topics. Thank you.